So we're queued up. AIM is factory versus plantation. What you're going to actually start today, it's going to be your homework too. And of course, it's not going to be until we come back from our little mini vacay, or our break really, because that's the reality of the schedule. But you're going to look at the rules of factory life versus the rules of plantation life. But before we get to that, write down the AIM and think about the do now. You're already going to have background information on this because you dealt with it in middle school. So, AIM's factory plantation. According to your knowledge, where does slavery exist in present day?
Like today?
The present day.
Yeah. Present day is today. That's correct. And again, I'm apologizing for posting the incorrect exemption list. I would change it and put it up just during lunch, right now, immediately after class. Because I looked at the term 2 averages, not the average of the full semester. So it's going to change people. Some people that were exempt aren't going to be exempt. And some people that were not exempt will be exempt. Right? So slavery today, where does it exist? Yes.
A big percentage of the slavery that exists in present day is in the Middle East.
Maybe the Middle East, you've heard? Okay.
Asia.
Asia. India.
Africa.
Africa.
Latin America.
Latin America.
All around the world.
Poor countries. Okay. Why would it exist maybe in poor countries more than rich countries?
Because they need like more hard labor and like there's not enough money to pay for it.
More hard labor, not enough money, less opportunities. But I have news for you. It exists in rich countries just the same. Yeah. Maybe not as prevalently though.
Yeah, like less control.
Class control?
No, like less.
There's less. Okay, less kind of policing.
Yeah, like so funny. There's like a type of slavery, but it's like the child laborers. And like the guys that like kidnap kids in order to get the organs and sell them. Like organ trafficking. Organ trafficking.
Okay. Yeah, I mean you find that in also very unstable countries.
I remember that Mr. Brown told us on 7th grade that a restaurant that was 10 minutes away from his house had slaves.
In Chinese restaurant.
I remember, yes, in New Orleans, I think.
How would you, I mean this slavery's off, when you think of slavery, what type of slavery do you think about? What usually comes to mind? When you hear that word slavery.
A black person.
Okay, you think of black person. What types of labor are they engaged in? Yeah.
Yeah, like forced workers.
Forced workers doing what kind of work though? What kind of labor?
Textiles or
Working in you're saying textiles, so like on a machine?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Like in factories.
In factories maybe?
Or sex slaves.
Sex slaves?
Yeah,
What about in the southern United States?
Plantations.
Plantation, so field slaves working out, agricultural labor.
Legal Mexican immigrants without their papers getting paid whatever to work in the field.
Right, which is, I mean, you could say a form of maybe wage slavery, and we'll talk about what that is today. But slavery exists everywhere. Where do you think the majority of the profits of slavery go?
To the big countries. Like
The big companies.
Big countries, big companies. Look at this graphic. Hopefully, there. So, which regions are best represented on this?
Sub-Saharan Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, but which ones are like, where's the majority of revenue going? Okay. Is anybody surprised by that or no?
not quite.
Right. So therefore, I mean, I've benefited in some way from this. Do you think you have? How have you maybe perhaps benefited from this?
Prices are lower.
Prices are lower, right? Especially as far as clothing is concerned, right? I mean, if you actually pay someone the true value of their labor to produce a product, clothing product, a pair of shoes. I don't know if any of you guys go to Italy, but if you want to buy a nice pair of handmade Italian shoes, I mean, minimally, on sale, you're talking about $500. You can probably get $300 too. But, you can pay, yeah, that's one example. There's many, but, slave labor keeps prices low. So certainly, unknowingly, we've all benefited from it. Hopefully unknowingly.
Maybe your shirt is made with
Yeah, it's very possible. There's no way I would have a finding out.
Like chocolate.
It says made in Mauritania.
I like
Chocolates
chocolate.
have like
Yeah.
little things where it's like free.
Free trade.
Yeah, free trade.
That's a
Yeah,
little bit
everyone's-
different. That's a little bit different. Yeah.
And diamonds.
Yeah. Well, you guys have probably seen the movie Blood Diamond.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I also believe that like since prices
Uh-huh.
are lower when it has like slave labor, then that means that like people prefer like cheaper things and stuff that is more expensive but actually like fair. So like the slave trade and stuff like that, it's never going to end because the people prefer cheaper things.
Well, this is a great point. It's a luxury to be able to buy fair trade products. You guys know free trade. Okay, we have free trade here in Costa Rica to the United States, CAFTA. Free trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, NAFTA, where there's no import or export, tariffs, right? So products move, they move, without hindrance. They move freely across borders. This isn't necessarily good for laborers, though. Sometimes protective tariffs help laborers because they get them more money. So if you buy coffee, for example, coffee that's produced by free trade, the laborer is usually going to make a lot less money. The coffee producer, the farmer. But fair trade, there's protective tariffs in place where they are given more of the revenue of the coffee. You understand? But for the consumer in the United States to be able to buy only fair trade products, what do you need?
A lot of money.
A lot of money. Like me, coming from New York City, living in Brooklyn, a fancy area of Brooklyn, where, there's many millionaires, etc., or multimillionaires. They have the food co-op and all these farmers markets and all these organic markets, right? And you can buy milk for $8, wonderful. It's made in a local farm. There's no pesticides, no, what do you call it? What do they call it? What do they call it when you get a virus? They give you antibiotics. There's no antibiotics, right? There's no additives. It's all natural, but it costs so much money nobody can afford it. So certainly this is an excellent point, that they keep prices low. And a lot of people don't have the luxury to be able to pay more, right? They want to pay less, or they need to pay less, okay? Let's look at these statistics about slavery today. And you're probably aware of some of this, I'm sure. You dealt with it in 7th grade. I'm glad you're remembering stuff from 7th grade. So 10 facts about modern slavery. Can you read the first one, Jamie?
Slavery. Forced to work without pay under threat of violence and unable to walk away.
So this is the simple definition of it. Make sure you understand that, because we're going to have a little debate over, what actually is slavery and what is not. Because there are blurred lines here, and there's gray areas. So when people are forced to work under threat of violence, with the inability to leave, okay? Can you read the second one, Jimena?
27 million slaves in the world today.
Do you know that there's more slaves numerically today than ever over the course of world history? We are at the apex, numerically speaking. There's been proportionally more slaves at times in the past. You understand?
Yes.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Before there were more people, like less people, so.
Okay, good. It's clear. So there's more now than ever, but less of the population is represented. So that's good. That's a positive. It's a negative and a positive. All right. Can you read the third one, Willem?
Yes. Slavery is not legal anywhere, but happens everywhere.
Right. Good. Daniela?
Each year, thousands of slaves are trafficked into the U.S.
Good. Sergio?
The majority of slaves can be found in India and in African countries.
So you guys said these immediately, but even though the minority of profits are going to the countries where it actually exists, ironically.
The majority of slaves.
Vias?
Slaves work in fields, brothels, homes, mines, restaurants, anywhere slave owners can feed their creatures.
Are you aware what all those things are? Okay.
Yes.
Brothels, human trafficking for prostitution. Okay. Okay. Human trafficking.
Human trafficking is the modern day slave trade.
Right. Next one.
$90 is the average cost of a human slave around the world.
Pretty low, right? So you're probably wearing shoes that cost more. Some of you, Jamie, for example. But this is staggering because if this is an accurate statistic, you could all afford, or your parents could afford for you, a slave. Would you more than one? Would you own a slave if it were legal?
No.
Yes.
I'm just curious to ask because
Legal, yes.
A lot of people said yes.
Yes, but I wouldn't treat
I
it.
would.
But you wouldn't feel like this is morally abhorrent?
Yeah,
No.
it would be
Yeah, but it
well
would
by
be
the-
immoral in the way it could work.
But there's, okay.
But it's
So you would own a slave, but you're saying you treat your slave fair.
No,
Guys, I think
no, I'm not
slaves-
saying
You're
that.
a slave.
It's a slave.
Like,
No,
you
I know
don't-
it's
you
a
don't
slave,
pay them
but-
like
I'm not
food,
saying
you
that, I
don't pay
wouldn't.
them like
Or
food.
whip.
I would.
I would feed them like normal, but I wouldn't be my friend. They would be my slave.
Wonderful.
He would work.
Well, let's hope you never have that
Yeah, I
opportunity.
wouldn't give him like love.
Okay?
I won't.
I hope so. Last one, or second last one, Johanny. Okay.
Bonded labor, attached labor, restavek, forced labor, endurance, indentured servitude, and human trafficking.
Okay, have you guys heard of most of those at least?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Right.
I never heard like.
You know the word you know the word euphemism? You ever hear of a euphemism? Okay. A euphemism is basically when you call something a term that has it's less weighted, it gives it less impact. Like for example, we fight the United States military is in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? And it's killing terrorists who are people, but they refer to them as insurgents. Right? They use the word insurgents. It's less of a weighted term, right? It kind of sugarcoats it. 5 insurgents were killed today, outside of Baghdad, instead of 5 people per se. You understand? Another great example is when the military does bombing missions. They don't call them bombing missions. Does anybody know what they call them? They call them sorties. S-O-R-T-I-E. A sortie happened today outside of Erbil in Iraq, city in northern Iraq, because it's just not, it doesn't have the same impact. You sugarcoat it. It's a euphemism. You kind of say it to cover the real meaning. They're not slaves. They're debt bonded labor. It's just a way of kind of covering up the reality of the situation through language. Okay. Lastly, can Juan Solano read that?
We can end slavery in our lifetime. Everyone has a role to play. Government, business, international organizations, consumers, you.
Okay.
You.
The difficulty, we can all donate and be charitable human beings, but the difficulty is you really don't know, you don't see it because you're not part of it, and we don't know how we're benefiting from it. We have a sense, but you don't know specific situations when you are, So it's tough. But let's focus on one that actually relates perfectly to Costa Rica, where prostitution is legal, okay? In most countries, prostitution is not legal. There are plenty of countries where it is. Costa Rica is one, Germany, the Netherlands.
It is or it isn't?
It is legal here. In the United States, the only place I'm aware that it's legal is in Nevada, right? So in most of the country, it's illegal, and it's a big business here because you have tourism industry, people come in gambling, prostitution, and living here, I've been approached by them on the streets, and a lot of them aren't from Costa Rica. I'm not going to ask them if they're slaves; it's none of my business. But I've met people from Eastern Europe that are working here, right?
Like
Russians, Ukrainians, all over. Let me read this. So this is a little advertisement, work abroad. It's not to actually recruit you, but it gives you a sense of how this works for a lot of people. A man offered Maria a job as a waitress in Johannesburg. Eager to earn some money, she agreed to travel with him from her home country to South Africa. But when Maria arrived in Johannesburg, there was no waitressing job. Instead, a man beat her and forced her to work as a prostitute. Every year, thousands of young women in Africa fall into this trap. Beware, attractive offers of employment, education, or marriage in a foreign country could be false. Right? Go ahead, Jamie.
There's a book called Half the Sky, I think.
Did you read that when you were middle
Yes,
school?
I read it.
I read it for Mr. Divine,
Mm-hmm.
and it tells you like a lot of stories and things like that are very impactful.
Similar situations. Yeah, it's easy, and they go to places where people are very vulnerable and life is hard. And then you have and they trick them, or, there's situations where actually parents are selling their children into sex trafficking and child slavery. Different standards, different levels of desperation. In this class, did we look at the child marriage in Yemen? We didn't look at it in this class. It was a different class, right? Because that was another good example. Where this family was selling their daughter to you know, she was like 11 and she
I have
sold it.
seen
We
that.
did look at that.
No, but not here, but I've seen that.
Okay, they're selling, 11-year-old girls to basically potential husbands for